So we're going to talk about chapter one, which is what we talked about last week, right? Then we're going to uncover the covers. These are just preliminary covers, but we need to talk about it. And then chapter two, which is what you're writing, right, Ed?
Yes. So just to recap, we are in the process of authoring a book. If you this is the first video you're watching, this is in a series of us, me, and Vasco actually going through the process of co-authoring the book about authoring a book.
It's kind
So
of
we are,
meta.
yeah. So it's like a loop. Um,
It's like
remind
the
me of the movie
Matrix.
Looper.
No, Inception, I think it is. Inception, yes.
Loops, yeah, Inception is as well. So yeah, that's great. So what we have done so far is in the first episode we identified that Vasco has a challenge in the to come up with a beginning of his first chapter. Then we decided we'll do an interview style extraction of Vasco's ideas so that Vasco will get some inspiration to go
Which is what we
and
did last episode.
exactly. That was episode 2, and this I'm going to just read out a paragraph, not paragraph, a sentence that how it changed the way like it looks and feels. So that's the result, and then you can relate it with the second episode. You can watch it, see it, how it led to this point. So that's pretty much how we are going to begin today.
All right, let's start with chapter one. So I'm eager to hear your feedback, Ed, because as you said, I was struggling with chapter one. For me, the beginning was the worst because the beginning is like how you get the reader into the book, that they understand both what's the potential, the transformation that the book promises, but as well, get into the action and get committed to reading the book, and that happens in the first few paragraphs of the first chapter. So that was one thing I was worried about. We did that interview. You read the result of the updated storytelling for chapter one. So what did you think?
So here's how I'll just read one sentence and let you judge for yourself. Um, Lights, camera, action. The jittery nervousness that prevents me from drinking a glass of water without spilling still comes on today when I'm speaking to an audience. I don't know about you, but I can really literally feel it. So I think this is a good job. It's putting me in the middle of an action scene just before something's about to happen, and I love that. So in my opinion, I think you like having the extraction of ideas from you is one point, but you also did some good job in putting it together and actually uh, making the action start, and especially of a book which is like how to write a book, like what can be actionable in that, like how can you put an action scene in that. But keeping that in mind, I think it's going in a very, very good direction. I've read the first page so far, and I couldn't stop reading the next paragraph after the previous one. So it's turning out to be good. Mission accomplished, what we wanted to do. It's in my opinion, it's done.
Yeah, so I think that for me, the insight from our previous interview was something you mentioned, which is what were the emotions that were going through when you had that first talk, right? So we're talking about a book that helps people to reach that state where they are publicly speaking about their expertise in industry conferences. So I think that what that did is that it triggered in my mind exactly that, which is the book starts with the transformation that the book promises. Because that talk wasn't actually my first talk, but it was my first talk at a big conference. It's one of the largest software conferences in Europe. Still happens, still going on. So it's for me that was it was the proof that the work that I had been doing by writing publicly about the topic was having an impact. And I think that that's also what our readers, the book readers, want, which is to get to the point where all of their experience becomes their expertise rather than just experience. There's one thing I say in the book, in the first chapter, which is uh, for people who author books, their experience is working much harder for them than someone who doesn't author a book, because nobody knows you, right? Like nobody knows what your expertise is, what your experience in. We'll talk about the cover also, because I think that's one of the key aspects of the transformation. And actually, we talked about it in the interview. You raised that topic, and it stuck to my mind. Is that there's actually two transformations we are talking about. So the first is from um, experience to speaker, right? And the authoring part short circuits that transformation. And then also from author to entrepreneur. And that second one is maybe another book later on in the future. But those two transformations, I think, explain very well what Jennifer, our avatar, is going through. First, to become an expert in their field, and then to grow and become an entrepreneur in their field, like for example as a speaker, a public speaker, or a consultant, or an owner of a company. So that's the two transformations we talked about in the last interview, and that really stuck to my mind, the fact that what we are talking about is how our readers will go through that transformation much faster than you and I did.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what we stand for with this book. So cool. I think it's a good time to dive in, show around what we have been playing with the cover designs has been.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start with option one. So a little bit about the briefing. So when we did the cover design requests, so we asked a few designers to do the cover for us, and we started with a briefing. And the briefing is very important in this. Um, the briefing tells the designer what are the key parameters for the cover design. And one of the things you will talk about, and when we get to the chapters about marketing, is that it's very important to be immediately recognizable among books that are in the same category, right? So that presents two challenges for us. One is that it needs to stand out. We'll talk about that as we go through the cover options. And then the second is that it needs to feel familiar. So that's also one of the challenges, right? So the briefing I gave the designers was that it needs to fit the same type of covers that we see on Amazon when we search for books about authoring books. And then the other thing is, of course, it needs to stand out and have a relatable brand recognition, and the brand here is Oikos Office Series. So there's going to be a bit of discussion about colors and brand recognition as we go through this. So these are the three options, and I've seen them for a while. There's two covers that Ed has seen. There's one which he hasn't seen yet, so he's going to review that uh, public live right now. So let's start with the first one.
Yeah, I like the color schemes of this, but the graphics and image on it looks more like a fiction um, book than a non-fiction. It doesn't ignite an emotion or doesn't show anything uh, any action going on. Again, doesn't show any movement, perception movement. So for me, it's very passive, this one. So that's why I was more inclined towards the second one that I saw.
Yeah. So
Um,
for me, the option one has overall a very appealing, visually appealing. Uh, the title kind of stands out. That's very important. We'll talk about that later. Um, and I like the book stacked up below, but the problem is, first, there's no brand recognition, so there's no link to the brand, the Oikos Office Series brand, and then also, as you said, the books at the bottom, if you pay attention, there are cooking books, language books, mystic books. So it's nothing to do with what we are talking about. So although I do like the overall design, I think we would need to overall this design before it could be acceptable as a cover. So, okay, we're both
Yeah,
down on
agreed on
option
that.
one, apparently.
Yeah.
All right, next is option two. This is the there's a, for those of you that are listening, there's a darker background, there's a target on the cover, and there's a big pencil right smack in the bullseye of that target. So, Ed, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I personally like these. The circles get the eye, like they grab the attention very very quickly compared to any other uh, uh, design styles. But also the 48-hour book method, the text itself is way bigger and way more visible than in the previous design. In my opinion, this one is the text in this one is good, and the circle is doing a great job. uh, I don't know if people will even care about the pencil or an arrow or something, but it's the circle that's grabbing the eye straight to it. And then like you go zoom in and then zoom out, you see, oh, this is what is happening. So for me, that it was that dramatic effect. Um, I'm just over exaggerating my feelings, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I like the contrast here. I like the highlight of the title. The 48 is actually highlighted more than the rest of the title, and I think that's a key promise we're making with this book. You know, you can have your book started in less than 48 hours, all the way from just having a fuzzy idea to actually having the first chapter written and actually outline the whole book. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the method in this sessions. But I also like the target because that's what it's a very directed cover, right? Like it has a pencil in the middle of a target. So it is about using your ability to write to create a value for you and of course for your readers most of all, but also a value for you. So getting somewhere, getting some goal achieved. So I really like that. This cover also has very high brand recognition. For those of you who know any of the previous books published by Yoiko series, you'll recognize the logo, the color scheme. So I this cover speaks to me.
Yeah. It's amazing how two different people have completely different things that they see. It's again something that I admire in the differentiality of people. Is I'm describing the whole journey of the experience of this cover, and you're describing the whole result that this cover is producing, and this is amazing. It's like it's way better than coming up with a cover design on your own, or like with just very few people. So it's
And we have
opinions
a
help.
tip about how to get many covers done very quickly and very cheaply. So
Yeah.
pay attention. We're going to talk about that. And then the last two covers, these are action option 3A and 3B, because they are quite similar. There's just slight differences in the color and the imagery, but they are quite similar. So
Yeah.
go for it, Ed.
Okay. So color wise, I like the 3B more. Design wise, in the structure, like for example, the strip in the end and the fonts. Also, uh, uh, I like both of them in that because they're same, just different colors. Um, don't like image in any of those. Preferably, I like 3B more simply because in the very first impression, they look like stock images, and it reduces the perceived value of the book
Yeah.
immediately.
So when I look at these covers, I like the color scheme, but it is not brand recognizable. It doesn't refer to the brand at all. And the other thing is, this is the kind of cover I would expect to see in a free lead magnet product, like chapter one of, not chapter one, but like 10 steps to blah blah blah, like 5-page PDF that you would download. So that's the kind of cover I would expect to see there. I think it does not convey the value of the method we are talking about. Um, the stock images, of course, are one example. The 3B option does, because it has gold in the color scheme, but then gold doesn't fit at all the brand, and uh, so from that perspective, it doesn't really relate to the message we want to give. So it doesn't help people understand that what we get from the book is a very concrete, actionable process or method that allows us to go from just having a fuzzy idea to actually having the first chapter written and the book outlined in 48 hours.
Yeah. So my vote is still with option two.
All right. And so regarding the cover, there's something I've learned from previous book publishing projects, and that is that we always have a preference. And in this case, we both have the same preference, option two, but it's always the customer who decides what the cover is. So we will be running a contest later on to select the cover. We might have more than these three options. We'll see. And ultimately, we'll do market research. So there's a couple of tools that I want to point out. One, which is where you can get like lots of options for cover design. It's called Fiverr, Fiverr.com, and all of these covers cost something like $100, all three designed, so delivered, completely delivered, less than $100. And why I use Fiverr is because you can get very quickly a lot of options. So all of these covers took less than a week to get. So we talked about it last week, and then I went on Fiverr, created the briefing, asked the designers, and we got three designs in less than 7 days. And the goal is to explore what are the multiple options, right? That's one of the things that we want to emphasize, is that we don't really know what will work. So options and experiments is how we find out what actually works. So we will be running a few experiments on the covers to see what actually sticks with the audience. What do they like? What do they get attracted to? Because this will be competing for people's attention on the Amazon storefront, right? When they look at Amazon, they'll see like 10 or even more books. And the cover needs to speak to the essence of the book, but also needs to be attractive so that people actually open it in its own product page and read the blurb.
Yep. Cool.
And there's the second tool is Pickfoo. Pickfoo.com is Pickfoo.com, and that's a market survey tool where you can, for example, you can do A/B tests on cover designs and so on. So it's important to have those tools if you really want to dive into understanding what your customers are willing to accept and will react to. Then that's definitely the two tools: Fiverr for options, and then Pickfoo for doing market survey.
Cool. So we can dive in the discussion of chapter two, and maybe you can help me with the structure. So I've got some outlines. Maybe we can just discuss some things, and I'll take notes, and we'll be done. That will be.
Let's go for it. So
I'm starting.
let's first introduce what is the title slash topic of chapter two. So chapter one is the story, right? The what is the transformation we're talking about, and explaining that, and showing examples. What is chapter
So
two?
chapter two is one of the base chapters that people need to understand by heart, like a concept, before they actually take action to author a book with a purpose of getting invited to speak at conferences. But that's just one of the reason. You can switch that with getting more clients, building a business, or anything else in the end. uh, and that is, out of so many different ways out there, different media, different channels, different things, book is the is the right medium for you to build your reputation. So what I want to explore is how a book dominates the reputation building compared to all other fast food style media available online and offline today. So that's the core essence. Now the topic itself is learn how a book can help you build your reputation as an expert, not any reputation, as an expert. So I wanted to cover a little bit about reputation. That reputation is not what everyone talks about. It's not something that your experience, your uh, people talking about you behind your back is built on. Reputation is actually something that's completely in your control, and you can change it anytime. It's busting all those myths that hold people back, assuming reputation is like a static situation, and taking control of that factor, that you can craft your reputation anytime you like, um, gives you an a point in decision that, like, it makes it easy for you to decide, okay, this is the way for me to control how I want people to perceive
So
about
what
me.
you're trying to introduce is first that book is how you establish reputation, and I also mentioned that in chapter one. There's a very old technology that people still respect today. It's very Lindy. For those of you who don't know, just search for Lindy effect, and you will figure that out. Then you're going to say that reputation is the result of our actions, and then third, you're going to say that the reputation is the result of a deliberate action, and book is a very high impact deliberate action to build your reputation. Is that what you mean?
Slight variation to that, yes. Structurally it's going in that direction, just a nuance difference. For example, instead of our action, it's a combination of our intention as well as control over the environment that create the perception in other people's mind. So it's a little bit different approach than just, like, step one, step two, step three. So it's more realization. So once you realize, everything else becomes easy, because you'll find a way to
So
control the end.
what is the challenge? The
Okay.
challenge that that story starts with, like where we are and where we want to be. What is that
Okay.
challenge?
Yeah. So what I wanted to do, I have a structure that I'll just bullet point wise, I'll read it out. My challenge is to settle on a structure. That is this a good structure? Should I just go ahead and do it? And if I change something, what should I change? So what I did was I went on to Medium, and because I'm writing now, I'm exploring more Medium than ever before. Medium, for those who don't know, Medium is YouTube of words. So instead of videos, it, it's like a YouTube of blogs, and it it measures people reading, like if they're reading the full article, they're reading half and stuff. So what you can actually do, you can go and explore the famous articles or featured articles, and then backtrack it, what is grabbing people's attention a lot. So I have kind of decoded some of the elements, but just wanted to make sure that they all fit together to make the point that we are trying to make here. And here we go. So I have headline ideas. Then there are a couple of quotes that I would like to include to begin with. Then I want to introduce concept by other people about authoring. So basically, people who have already authored. There could be a reiteration of example from chapter one, or some famous people, and then introduce a problem. And the problem is the reputation, that you're competing against everyone else who's have the same profile on
So
LinkedIn.
that's the
And
challenge that the reader is facing, right?
yes, that's the
Competing
challenge, not my
for,
challenge. That's the challenge reader is
yeah,
facing.
yeah.
So that the challenge that we are going to convince them that, like, this book will take them out of that challenge.
So
uh,
one tip for me is always start with the challenge. Don't do any context. Start right in the middle of that challenge, and just like I did in chapter one, if you can come up with an action scene that describes that challenge, either the challenge or the transformation, right? I mean, but in storytelling, you are in point A and you want to get in point B. And what we do is that we explain what goes from A to B, like the method that takes you from A to B. So either start the reader on A or start the reader on B to create the desire to read the whole thing, but you need to establish the difference. What is point A, where we are today? What is point B, where we will be at the end of this transformation? And then we go through the steps of how that happened, give stories, examples of how it happened to other people. So uh, that's one tip: is start with the problem that the reader had, that Jennifer has.
Okay, so start with the problem, then agitate the problem. So basically, people think the problem is only within the scope that they think the problem is, but actually, usually problems have bigger other problems associated with that that we don't see until they come on us. So create a big bubble of those problems and then make the point, the solution, introduce the solution and the reasoning behind that solution, or actually even the reasoning, the ideal solution to this problem, and then the medium that we are selecting, which is publishing a book, uh, actually fits all those criteria that needs to overcome that problem, and back it up with other people's ideas from other authors, other people who have done it other than us, and that's mostly um, that's the big picture structure that I have in mind.
Okay, so I I think I see it. So start with the reader's problem. We've talked about that. Then second, as you said agitate the problem or explain what are the other things. I would pick three high level things of those that go beyond the initial challenge, and write the chapter around those three. So it could be something like how those three things relate to reputation and get resolved when we write the book. And then at the end, it is so so we talked about the problem, the main challenge that the reader has. Then we say, okay, so but there's also this and this and this, and here's how this person solved this one, and here's how this problem person solved this one, here's how this person solved this one. And then the last part should be about how the book itself helps you to get and overcome all of those three, let's call it mini challenges that you have as part of the bigger challenge. I don't know if three is the right count, right? I mean, it could be six
Yeah,
or nine or whatever,
yeah,
but the idea is to actually uh, walk the reader through that story, right? Like the hero story, right? Like you start with the clear vision of where you want to be, but then the first challenge comes up, and what is that, and why is it important, how do you solve it? And then you've solved the first challenge, but of course there's a second one coming up, and you know, a number of them. And then at the end, it is kind of the insight, the mind shift that happens in our reader, we hope, obviously, but that happened to you and to me, which is okay, so this is why the book is important.
yeah. And that thingy with call to action, and call to action is in chapters, in my opinion, almost always read the next chapter, and that's basically tease something about the next chapter, what they like, or introduce a small, this problem, this solution leads to another problem, and then the next chapter is to solve that problem.
And
It's
actually
like,
that what you just said highlights one of the structured tricks that we have in the 48-hour method, which is that every chapter has the same structure, beginning to end, that the book has. The book has the exact same structure. In fact, I don't remember if we talked about it, but there's three main challenges that we talked about, that we talk about in the book. The first one is you're an expert, you just don't know it yet, because all of us have experience that we can transform into recognized expertise. So that's the first phase of the book. Then the second is that you're an author, you just don't know it yet. And we talk about all of the things that go around that. And then the third one is you're an expert author. And now the transformation is others don't know it yet. That's where we talk about sales and marketing and getting your voice out there and getting people to pay attention. And so these are the three things we talk about in the book, but every chapter has three things or four or five that go through the same, like challenge, challenge one, challenge two, challenge three, challenge four, and then transformation. And what you just said, cliffhanger for the next chapter. And of course, the book also has a cliffhanger, which is how do we then go on and from an author become an entrepreneur? And we don't solve that in this book. That's not what the book is about, but it gives you that ability. And then it allows you to then take action, say, okay, so if I do this book, I get recognized as an author. That's my big challenge right now. But when you get to the end of the book, you start to understand that actually by writing the book and publishing the book, I become a speaker, I become an author, but this opens up the door for entrepreneurship, right? Which is the next transformation, right? So I that's one of the key things about the 48-hour book method is that the book has a structure that is exactly the same as the chapters. Each chapter is a fractal of the whole book. In fact, if we go even deeper, each section in the chapter is a fractal of the chapter, which is a fractal of the part of the book, which is a fractal of the whole book. And that's one of
Yeah.
the cool things we talk about later on, which allows people to actually develop the book very quickly, because the book is that it helps write itself when you use this method.
Yeah, fractal is what I was thinking. I couldn't recall the word when you started describing about the chapters, that every chapter is the same structure as the book and the whole book is the same structure as the bigger picture. That's the perfect um, embodiment of what we are trying to do. Um, Another challenge I face is kind of an opposite to the challenge that we help you solve in the previous video, which is how much of my personal stories should I be including without boring people? Because for me, it's natural. For me to demonstrate empathy, I have to put myself in my own shoes and then show it that this is how it worked for me, and this could be related to you the way you do it. But then I also feel that, like, if I'm talking about myself this way, I still am talking about myself, and that kind of make me a little bit doubtful, like, oh, is it becoming too much my story?
Yeah, I had the exact same feeling I was writing chapter one. But one of the things that I've learned is that first, if you're not talking about your challenges, your struggles, no one can believe you're real, right? So what one key aspect is always talk about the struggles, the frustration, the anxiety. That's how I ended up starting chapter one, right? With anxiety and nervousness. So those are the things that our readers will go through. So that I would definitely include those in. And of course, we need to talk about the successes as well. And as much as possible, relate the successes to uh, an, a goal, an expectation, a desire that the reader has. There's one very simple formula, which is I struggle so that you benefit. And that's actually what authors do. They struggle with something so that the readers benefit. And if you write it that way, it doesn't necessarily always naturally come like more empathic, but I would say this. I struggled with nervousness and jitterness at the start of every presentation so that you, Jennifer, know that you can get there and that being nervous is normal and that you don't need to be afraid to be nervous. Accept that you're nervous. Accept, we talked about that a few times, right? Accept the fact that the journey is uncomfortable and
Yeah,
it will be uncomfortable all
yeah,
the time. Even when you're there at the peak, it will still be uncomfortable. So, like, that's what I would think about this. Okay, so how can I relate my struggle to your benefit? Because the benefit is always the reader's benefit, while the struggle is the author's struggle. And that puts the reader, and that's the key rule of thumb here, that puts the reader in the middle of the story. And that's what we want, because we want this to be about the reader, not the author. And I guess that's what you were struggling with.
Yeah, yeah. So too much of me.
Well, so
Yeah.
this is the thing. When you feel that it is too much of you, it probably is too much, right? So use that intuition and turn that into a resource. So what is it that helps you feel that it's not too much of you? It's to talk
No,
about
but
the
that
reader.
is also combined with my biases of, and this is why it's confusing me, because I had definitely imposter syndrome, and I had some kind of social anxiety that make me feel stupid if I come, like, express myself. And that's another journey that I'm going through, but express myself truly, honestly, in the way I am, in my eccentric way. So there's a philosophy, there's a school of thought that, like, you are what you are, that's fine, just accept it, move on. And then there's other thing is like, oh yeah, like, the lifelong experience of people's expectation, and I'm not meeting it and judging myself. So balancing, trying to balance between that and and what I'm trying to express, the idea, the the inspiration for the reader to move and do something.
Uh, so if you would try to convey that what triggers that feeling, right? So it what is it when you write that triggers the feeling that you're too much centered on your story rather than the reader's story?
It's just that it's not okay here. It's not the logical thing that, like, that should, I mean, to me, when I write my story, when I explain something about myself, it makes perfect sense that, like, this makes the point. But it's the feeling that, I felt stupid in the past of expressing too much of myself. So maybe this is what I'm doing.
Mm.
Nobody said that you're stupid. Nobody did anything. It's just, um, probably, who knows, social anxiety, some kind of.
That, well, so that definitely can be social anxiety, and maybe that's related to how you build reputation.
Exactly.
Maybe you can talk about how that anxiety prevents you from deliberately taking action to build your reputation.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure Jennifer is feeling the same,
Right.
right? Jennifer, when she's writing, Jennifer is our avatar. When she's writing, she probably is asking herself, I mean, is this too much about me?
Mm. And
So
I
what?
saw this happening in you. Like, you didn't actually write much about yourself, and you still were, like, uncomfortable.
But I know now, I know why, thanks to your interview from the last episode. So do check that out, which was that I was missing Jennifer's story.
Mm.
So I wasn't talking too much about me. I was actually talking about other authors as well.
Right.
But the, Jennifer wasn't yet at the center of the story, right?
Right.
And that, for me, what triggered was, well, there were two things. So first was the action scene, and that gave me the thought, what does Jennifer want? And I already know what Jennifer wants.
Yeah.
I just needed to put her at the center of that story. And I tried, I struggled with that in the previous versions of chapter one. But then the latest version really puts, as you said, right? Lights,
Right.
camera, action. I still feel the nervous jitterness that prevents me from drinking a glass of water without spilling every time I get on stage.
Yeah.
This is how Jennifer feels. Like most people will feel that way. And so what I did is I literally, in my mind, I picked Jennifer and put her in the middle of the story. I told her story, of course, through my own experience, but her story, because what Jennifer
How
wants,
do
what
you
I,
do that? Do you imagine yourself as Jennifer and then call it Jennifer? Because that's the way I can do it. But if I
no, I
imagine
start
myself coming
from,
out of myself and put somebody else, it's difficult for me to be empathic. That
yeah. So
empathetic
I
about
didn't
that.
do that. What I
Yeah.
asked myself was, what is the goal that Jennifer has? Where does she see herself when this method succeeds for her?
Okay.
Right? And you're talking about the specific thing, which is build reputation through a book, right? So,
Yeah.
where does Jennifer see herself? How does
Right.
she feel? Where is she? What is she looking at? What is
Yeah.
around her
Right.
as she succeeds with the things you describe in chapter 2?
Or push through
Yeah,
those
so
things.
that's the so there's two steps in the story where the reader is already. First is
Right.
the struggle, the anxiety, the fear, the not knowing, right? And the second is the result. Once I've done all of the things, where am I? Right? So you can start the story at any of one of these points
Right.
because the reader immediately relates to that.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that's how I did it. And literally what I did, if I try to explain it logically, is pick Jennifer's character and put her in the middle of the story. And I asked,
Right.
what does she want? What do I have that can explain to her in very concrete terms, action scene, what she wants? So
Yeah.
that she feels that this is her story. This is about her succeeding as an expert author.
Yeah, I think also this ties very back to what we have for the video 3, that how the whole Jennifer customer avatar looks like, how it will help, because this is how exactly it is helping us. Whenever we find ourselves lost, open the map, Jennifer's story map, Jennifer's avatar map, and see where you're stuck, and then put her
Yeah.
in the center of everything.
And we have a
Yeah, I
lot
think,
of tips to share about how to build those. I remember we had our 48-hour workshop in Helsinki,
yeah,
a
it was really
pretty
amazing. I
cold
think,
spring weekend in Helsinki.
yeah, yeah, that actually has become my standard practice for almost every project that I do. Maybe I don't replicate in the exact same way in that intensity that we did, but in some or the other ways, I still model everything I do after that workshop that you conducted for two of us to work on this book. Yeah.
Yeah, which is what the book is about,
So
to
cool.
explain
I
what that
think that
workshop is.
I got my action points, I got my structure ideas. We can now safely conclude this call.
All right. See you guys next time.
See you.